I drove winter supply routes across the Yakutia Republic for almost 4 years. I can tell you the weight tolerance of river ice at different temperatures. I can tell you how diesel behaves at -50. I can tell you what a loaded KAMAZ truck sounds like when the road surface shifts from compacted snow to bare ice beneath you at 60 kilometers an hour. There's one thing I can't tell you, and it's the only thing anyone ever asks about. What's between the villages? The first thing they said during orientation was simple. If you need fuel, stop in a village. If you're tired, stop in a village. If your truck breaks down, stay in the cab and radio for help. You do not stop between villages. You do not get out of your truck between villages. You do not investigate anything you see between villages. I asked why. 3 different people gave me 3 different answers. Weather, exposure, wolves. Each answer made sense on its own, and none of them explained why every veteran driver on the route treated the rule like something older and heavier than a company policy. There was a map of NE7 on the wall of the briefing room, hand-drawn, laminated, years old. 5 villages marked between the depot and the mine, each one a small black dot with the name beside it. But there was a 6th dot. Between the 3rd village and the 4th, right in the middle of the longest gap, somebody had drawn a stop and then scratched it out, scored through it so many times the laminate had gone white. No name, just a dot, crossed out, in the one place on the whole route where there's nothing but 140 kilometers of forest. I asked the trainer about it. He looked at it for half a second, said the map was old and full of mistakes, and moved on. Later I asked Kolya. He didn't tell me the map was old. He said, "Don't mark that place. Don't point at it." Then he started talking about tire chains and never came back to it. I should explain how an American ends up driving freight through northeastern Siberia. It's not a complicated story. I drove long haul in the States for 12 years. Cross country, lower 48, mostly agricultural freight out of Iowa and Nebraska. Decent money, simple work. When my wife left in 2018, I started looking for contracts overseas, not out of adventure, out of the need to be somewhere my life wasn't. A logistics company in Yakutsk was hiring international drivers for winter resupply runs to the mining settlements in the northeast. 5-month contracts, November through March, 4 times my stateside pay, room, board, and cold weather gear included, 2 weeks of training, then they assigned you a route. My route was the NE7, 600 kilometers of winter road running northeast from a depot outside Yakutsk, through 5 villages, to a mining outpost called Polyarny. The road only existed in winter when the rivers and frozen swamp could hold a loaded truck. For those months, it was the only supply line. Fuel, food, medicine, mail, everything went in on a truck, my truck. A round trip took 4 days, and I slept in village guest houses or in the cab. The gaps between villages ran from 60 kilometers up to 140, the long one falling between the 3rd and 4th villages. 1 to 3 hours of empty driving each, taiga pressing in on both sides like walls. A corridor of white road and dark trees, and nothing else. My first 2 runs were supervised. I rode with a veteran driver named Kolya Nikolai Pavlovich, though nobody used his full name. 58 years old, he'd been driving NE7 since the route was established. He spoke enough English for basic conversation, and when English failed, he pointed or swore. Kolya drove the first run. I watched. I drove the second. He watched. He was patient, methodical, and calm. He checked the truck before every departure the same way, in the same order, every time. Tires, fluid levels, fuel, cargo straps, radio, heater, auxiliary battery. Then he'd start the engine, let it idle for exactly 8 minutes, and pull out. On the road he was quiet, not unfriendly, quiet. Between villages he did not talk. He did not adjust the radio. He did not look at the tree line. He watched the road ahead with a kind of attention I recognized from driving in whiteout conditions, except the weather was clear. The road was flat. Visibility was fine. I asked him about the rule on the second run. We were in the long gap between the third and fourth villages. Mid-afternoon, though in January that meant twilight going dark. The trees were black against the snow. The headlights carved a tunnel of visibility, and everything outside it was formless. Kolya, the rule about stopping. Is it about the cold? He didn't answer for a while, long enough that I thought he hadn't heard or had chosen not to. The cold kills slow, he said. You have time. You radio, you wait. Someone comes. The cold is not why. Then why? He looked at the tree line on the left side, then back at the road. Because when you stop, you are noticed. I waited for him to say more. He didn't. We drove the remaining 70 kilometers in silence, and when we reached the fourth village, he went through his shutdown procedure the same way he always did, and he didn't mention it again. My first solo run was in late November, -42 on the thermometer when I left the depot. Clear sky, light wind, no precipitation, good conditions, or what passed for them. Nothing happened. I drove the full route depot to Village 1, through all 5 stops to the mine, unloaded, stayed the night, drove back. 4 days, 12 hours a day behind the wheel. The gaps between villages were long and empty and cold and exactly what I expected them to be. Forest, snow, road, silence. My second solo run was the same. Third, same. I started to think the rule was what I'd originally assumed, a weather precaution inflated by superstition and repetition into something it wasn't. Siberia does that to rules. When a mistake can kill you in 30 minutes, every rule starts to sound sacred. By mid-December, I'd settled into the rhythm. I knew where the ice was roughest, where the grade changed, where the tree line pulled back and let the wind hit the truck broadside. The work was hard and isolating, and I was good at it. That's why they'd hired me. It was my 4th run when I first noticed the headlights. I was between the 2nd and 3rd villages. About 50 kilometers of forest road, most of it running along a frozen river. The surface was good. I was making steady speed, 50, maybe 55 kilometers an hour. It was dark, January dark, which in Yakutia means the sun set at 2 in the afternoon and wouldn't come back until 10 the next morning. I checked my mirrors. Behind me, maybe half a kilometer back, there were headlights. That shouldn't have been unusual. There were other trucks on the route. Not many, but a few other supply drivers, the occasional mining service vehicle, a maintenance crew. But I'd been driving for 40 minutes since the last village, and when I'd left, there had been no one behind me. No vehicle at the fueling point, no engine noise, nothing. I watched the lights in my mirror. They held their distance, half a kilometer, maybe a little more. They matched my speed exactly. When I slowed going into a rough patch, they slowed. When I accelerated on the other side, they accelerated. I picked up the radio. NE7 base, this is McKenna, northbound between Village 2 and Village 3. I've got a vehicle behind me. Can you confirm any other traffic on the route tonight? Static. Then a voice, the overnight dispatcher in Yakutsk. "McKenna, no other vehicles dispatched on NE7 tonight. You are the only scheduled run." I looked in the mirror. The lights were still there. Same distance, same speed. "Copy that. I've got headlights approximately 500 meters behind me. Consistent speed. They've been there about 15 minutes. "Understood. Do not stop. Proceed to Village 3 and report when you arrive." I drove. The lights followed. 45 minutes of forest road, and they held that distance the entire time, never closing, never falling back, matching every variation in my speed with mechanical precision. When I pulled into Village 3 and my headlights hit the first building, I checked the mirror. The road behind me was empty, dark in both directions. No headlights, no vehicle, no tracks in the snow except mine. The dispatcher asked me to confirm arrival. I did. He didn't mention the headlights. I didn't bring them up again. I met Marat during my 5th run. He drove a parallel supply route, NE9, running east of mine, and our schedules occasionally overlapped at Village 3, which served as a hub for both routes. He was Russian, mid-40s, born in Novosibirsk, and had been driving supply routes in Yakutia for 7 years. He was talkative, practical, and openly dismissive of most of the superstitions that clung to the winter roads. "Old women's stories," he said in the kitchen of the Village 3 guest house, eating mutton stew. This is what happens when people live in darkness 5 months a year. They see things, they hear things, they make rules. You don't follow the rule? I follow it. The company requires it. But I follow it because breakdowns kill you, not because the forest is haunted. He grinned. I'm a practical man. I liked Marat. He was the first person on the route who talked about the rule without his voice changing. 2 weeks later, he was gone. It was early February. I was at Village 3 when the radio call came in. Marat, on NE9, between his 2nd and 3rd stops. His voice was calm, but confused. "Base, this is Danilov. I'm northbound on NE9, approximately kilometer 80. I'm seeing a fuel depot ahead. Request confirmation." Silence. Then dispatch. "Danilov, there's no fuel depot between your current villages. The next fuel point is Village 3. I understand that. I'm looking at it. Small structure, lit, fuel pump visible. It's right on the road. Danilov, proceed past it. Do not stop. It's a fuel depot. I can see the... Do not stop. Proceed to Village 3. Confirm. Static, long static. Danilov, confirm. Nothing. The line stayed open for another 40 seconds. I could hear his engine. Then the transmission ended. They sent a search team from Village 3 the next morning. I went with them. It took 4 hours to reach the coordinates of his last transmission. His truck was there, parked on the right side of the road, pulled slightly off the compacted surface onto the shoulder. Engine running, headlights on, heater blowing. The cab was warm. The doors were closed. Marat was not inside. His coat was on the seat. His gloves were on the dash. His radio handset was hanging from the cord. Outside the truck, the snow was undisturbed. No footprints leading away from the vehicle. No footprints beside it. The snow around the truck was smooth, compacted only by wind, as if no one had ever gotten out. The fuel depot he had described was not there. There was no structure, no pump, no foundation. Just forest on both sides of the road, unbroken for as far as I could see, in every direction. They towed his truck back to Village 3. The engine was in perfect working order. Full fuel tank, no mechanical faults. Everything functioned, everything except the driver. Marat was listed as missing. No body was recovered, no tracks, no blood, no debris. The official cause was exposure following disorientation, which satisfied nobody, because you can't die of exposure in a warm truck with a full tank and a working radio. That night, I found Kolya at the Village 3 guest house. He was smoking near the wood stove, reading an old newspaper. I sat down across from him. "Kolya, what happened to Marat?" He folded the newspaper. He stopped. He stopped because he saw a fuel depot that doesn't exist. "Yes." "What does that mean?" Kolya looked at me for a long time, not deciding whether to trust me, deciding whether the words existed. "The road between villages is long," he said. "In the dark, in winter, the road is very long, and sometimes it shows you things." "What kind of things?" "Things that make you stop. A depot, a person, a vehicle with its lights on. Something that a good driver would stop for. Something that a decent man would stop for. And if you stop," he stubbed out his cigarette, "then you are standing between villages, and you are noticed, and what notices you does not let you leave." "What is it?" "I don't know what it is. My father drove this road. His father drove the track before the road existed, dog, sled, horse. They didn't know either. They just knew the rule." He stood up. "Drive through. Whatever you see, even if it is someone you know, even if they are waving, drive through." 3 days later, on my 7th run, I heard the radio call. I was northbound between villages 4 and 5. The longest gap on the route, 140 kilometers of taiga forest, most of it in darkness. I'd been driving for about an hour. The road was good. The truck was running well. I was watching the headlight tunnel and thinking about nothing. The radio crackled, a woman's voice. Russian first, something I couldn't understand, rapid and strained, then static, then the voice again, and this time it was in English. Please stop. I need help. I am on the road." I didn't key the mic. I listened. "Please, I can see your lights. I'm just ahead. Please stop." The voice was clear, no distortion, no signal fade. It sounded like someone standing in the same room. I checked the road ahead. My headlights showed empty road, dark trees, nothing. "Please, Mitchell, stop." My name. My first name. The one I hadn't used on any radio call, any manifest, any company document. On every piece of paperwork, I was McKenna. Every radio check, every dispatch log, McKenna. Nobody on this route knew my first name. The voice said it again. "Mitchell, I need your help." I drove. My hands were tight on the wheel. I drove for the next 40 minutes without touching the radio, without checking the mirrors, without looking at anything but the road. When I reached Village 5, I parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the cab for a long time. I radioed dispatch and asked if there had been any transmissions on the NE7 frequency in the last hour. "Negative, McKenna. No transmissions logged." The second year was worse, not because the events increased. They didn't. The headlights appeared twice. I heard a distant engine on a night when no other vehicles were on the route. Once I passed a section of road where the snow on the shoulder had been compacted in the shape of tire tracks, leading off the road into the trees. Fresh tracks, no vehicle. But the thing that stayed with me from that second year didn't happen out on the road. It happened on paper. It was January. I pulled into Village 4 a little after 9 at night, on schedule, with a full load. The The intake clerk, an old woman named Anna Timofeyevna, who logged every delivery by hand in a ledger as thick as a Bible, met me at the storehouse the way she always did. I started unloading. She opened her book to sign the cargo in. Then she stopped. She looked at the page, then at me, then back at the page. She turned the ledger around so I could see it. There was already an entry for that day. My truck number, my route. The full manifest, every crate, every drum of fuel, every sack of flour, the exact counts, logged as received and signed for. The signature on the line was mine. I know my own signature. It was mine. The entry was time-stamped 4 hours before I arrived. I had not been to village for that day. I had not signed anything. I'd been on the road the entire time, alone, 60 kilometers back, and the cargo I was standing there unloading had, according to the book, already been delivered and received by me hours earlier, while I was still driving toward it. Anna didn't argue, and she didn't explain. She drew one line through the first entry, wrote a new one underneath it, and had me sign again. When I asked her what the first entry was, she said a single word, Durnoye, which Kolya later told me meant something close to a bad thing, the way you'd describe a stain that won't come out. Then she closed the book and would not open it in front of me again. I checked my own logbook that night in the cab. My delivery times were all correct. But there was a gap that morning, 40 minutes, between two of my own handwritten entries that I could not account for. 40 minutes I didn't remember, and the truck had moved during it. The odometer said so. I just wasn't there for it. What got worse, though, was the knowledge. The first year, I could rationalize light refraction, radio bleed from a distant frequency, wind-blown snow mimicking tire impressions, a clerk's clerical mistake. The second year, I couldn't. The rationalizations had worn through, and what was underneath them was the simple understanding that Kolya and every other veteran driver was right, and the rule was not a precaution. It was a survival mechanism, tested over generations by people who understood something about this road that I never would. But it was my third year when I saw the village. February, deep winter, -54 at the departure point, which meant -60 or colder in the exposed stretches. I was running northbound on the long gap between villages 3 and 4. 2.5 hours of driving, dark the entire time. The trees were so cold they cracked, sharp, percussive sounds like rifle shots in the forest. The heater was running full blast, and the inside of the windshield was still frosting at the edges. About 90 minutes in, I saw lights ahead. Not headlights, not a single structure. Lights, multiple, warm yellow, spread across a wide area, the glow of a settlement. As I got closer, the shapes resolved. Buildings, small wooden structures, clustered along the road, smoke rising from chimneys lit by the light below. A fuel tank on a raised platform, the kind every village on the route used. A cleared area that could be a vehicle turnaround. It looked exactly like the other villages on NE7. Same scale, same architecture, same layout. If I hadn't driven this route 40 times, I would have pulled in without hesitation. But I had driven this route 40 times. There was no village between Village 3 and Village 4. There had never been a village there. The gap was 140 kilometers of unbroken forest and frozen river. No settlement, no structure, nothing. And then I thought about the map in the briefing room. The 6th dot. The one somebody had scratched out until the laminate went white. It sat right here, right in the middle of this gap. The exact place Kolya told me never to point at. I was doing about 50 kilometers an hour. The village, or whatever it was directly ahead, straddling the road. I could see the buildings clearly now, windows lit from inside. A dog, or something shaped like a dog, sitting near the fuel platform. The details were perfect. Not approximate, perfect. The kind of perfect that real places never are. Because real places have broken fence posts, and uneven snow, and garbage bins, and all the small evidence of actual human occupation. This place had none of that. It was a photograph of a village. Every element correct. Nothing alive. I didn't slow down. I drove through at full speed. The buildings passed on both sides of me close enough that I could have read a sign if there had been one. The air didn't change. The temperature didn't change. The road surface didn't change. It was as if I'd driven through a projection. I checked my mirror. The road behind me was empty, dark, unbroken forest on both sides, stretching back as far as the taillights could reach. No buildings, no lights, no smoke, nothing but the road and the trees and the snow. I drove the remaining 50 kilometers to Village 4 with my eyes on the road and my hands locked on the wheel. When I arrived, I checked my odometer. The distance matched exactly what it should have been. 140 kilometers. The village I'd driven through had added nothing to the journey. It hadn't occupied any physical space. I told Kolya about it at the end of that run. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once. It showed you a village. That's new. New. For you. Not for the road. My father saw one. 1974. Same gap between 3 and 4. He said it had people standing outside, looking at him as he drove through. Were they real people? They were shaped like people. What does that mean? Kolya lit a cigarette, took a long drag. It means they stood the way people stand, but they didn't move the way people move. He said they turned to watch his truck, but all of them turned at exactly the same time. Same speed, same angle, like one thing wearing many shapes. I didn't drive for 2 days after that. Not because the company gave me time off, because I sat in the Village 1 guest house and thought about whether the money was worth it. 4 times my stateside salary. 5 months of work. A life that didn't require me to be anywhere specific or belong to anyone. I went back to the truck on the 3rd day. I did the pre-departure check in Kolya's exact order. I drove the route. There was a driver named Seryozha who worked the NE11 route, farther east, older than Kolya, quiet in a way that went past professional and into something closer to deliberate. He and I overlapped at the mine outpost in early March of my 3rd year, and after dinner, in the bunkhouse, he told me something unprompted. "You're the American," he said. "Yes." "You've seen things on the road." "Yes. I stopped once." He said it the way you'd say you'd once touched a hot stove. Flat, past tense. Not proud, not ashamed. "What happened?" "I saw a truck on the shoulder, headlights on. I thought it was Volkov, another driver, a friend. I pulled over, got out, walked to the other truck." He paused. The truck was empty. Cab was warm. Engine running. Same as always. "And?" I turned back to my truck. The walk was 30 meters. It should have taken 20 seconds. He looked at the wall. When I got back inside and closed the door, I checked my watch. 4 hours had passed. My fuel gauge had dropped by a quarter tank from idling. The heater had been running. Everything was consistent with 4 hours. "You lost 4 hours." I was standing between the 2 trucks for 4 hours, in -48. No coat, I left it in the cab. I should have been dead 3 times over. I didn't have frostbite. I didn't have hypothermia. I wasn't cold at all. He looked at me. That's what scared me, not the time, the fact that I was fine. Whatever was out there, it wasn't trying to kill me. It was keeping me alive. Why? He didn't answer that. My 4th year, last season, I'd already decided it would be my last before the run that convinced me. Late February, I was northbound between villages 2 and 3, the 60-kilometer gap, the short one. Easy drive, 45 minutes in good conditions. I'd done it 70, 80 times. 20 minutes in, the engine coughed. Not a stall. A hesitation, the kind of brief power interruption that could mean a fuel line issue, an air filter problem, a sensor malfunction. In Iowa, you'd pull over and check it. In Siberia, between villages, you don't. It coughed again and again. The RPMs started dropping. The truck was losing power, slowly but consistently. I nursed the throttle, kept the speed up as long as I could. The engine temperature was normal. Oil pressure was normal. Everything on the dash was green, except the reality that the truck was dying. I had 40 kilometers to Village 3. At my current rate of deceleration, I had maybe 20 minutes of driving left. I picked up the radio. NE7 base, this is McKenna, northbound between Village 2 and Village 3. Experiencing engine power loss, possible fuel system issue, requesting standby. Copy, McKenna. Can you reach Village 3? I'm going to try. The engine coughed again. The truck slowed to 30, then 25. The forest pressed in on both sides, dark and close. Then I saw it, a fuel depot. Small, low-slung corrugated metal. A single pump under a canopy. A light above the door, yellow, steady, industrial. And a figure standing beside the pump, wearing a heavy coat, watching my truck approach. I knew the NE7 route the way I knew my own hands. I had driven this specific gap between Village 2 and Village 3 at least 80 times. There was no fuel depot. There was no structure of any kind. There was nothing between these 2 villages except 60 kilometers of frozen road and taiga forest. The depot was there. The light was on. The figure was watching me. My engine was dying. The truck was doing 15 kilometers an hour and losing speed. I had maybe 30 kilometers of empty road between me and Village 3, and the math was not going to work. People ask me how I didn't stop. A dying truck, 60 below, a fuel depot right there with the lights on and a man waving me in. Every instinct I'd built in 12 years of driving said stop. Everything a decent person is supposed to do said stop. I want you to sit with that for a second before you decide what you would have done. The depot was 50 meters ahead. The pump was real enough that I could read the Cyrillic text painted on the canopy. The figure raised one hand, not waving, just lifting it, palm out, the way you'd signal a truck to slow down. I put both hands on the wheel. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. The engine rattled, caught, rattled again, and the truck lurched forward at maybe 20 kilometers an hour, shaking badly, passing the depot on the left side. In the side mirror, the figure was still standing there. It hadn't moved. It hadn't lowered its hand. It watched my truck pull away with an attention that was patient and total and utterly without urgency. 300 meters past the depot, the engine smoothed out. The coughing stopped. The RPMs climbed. The power came back in full, as if nothing had been wrong, as if the truck had been waiting to see what I would do. I made Village 3 in 22 minutes. I asked the mechanic to check the fuel system. He spent an hour going through everything. Filter, lines, pump, injectors. Nothing wrong. Everything clean. No fault. No debris. No ice contamination. Your truck is fine, he said, confused. There's nothing to fix. I made 2 more runs after that. Clean, uneventful, fast. I was counting down. 7 days until my contract ended. Then the flight from Yakutsk to Moscow to Chicago, and a life where the space between towns was just distance. My last run was on March 11th. Clear weather. -38, practically warm by February standards. I was southbound, heading back towards the depot, driving the long gap between Village 4 and Village 3. The final long stretch of my final run. I was 90 minutes in when I saw the truck. It was parked on the right shoulder, pulled halfway off the road onto the compacted snow, headlights on, a Kamaz, same model as half the trucks on the route. The driver's door was open. A man was standing beside the truck, facing the road, facing me. He raised his hand, not frantic, calm, the way a professional would signal another professional. I was 400 meters away when I recognized him, Marat. Same build, same posture, same coat, the blue insulated jacket he'd been wearing the day I last saw him in the Village 3 guest house 14 months ago. He stood beside the open door of his truck and he watched me approach with an expression I could see clearly in my headlights. He was smiling, not a grin, a small, patient smile. The kind of smile that said, "I've been waiting. I knew you'd come this way." His truck was the same truck. Same markings, same dents, same cracked reflector on the left rear corner that I'd noticed 100 times in the Village 3 lot. Everything was correct. Everything was perfect. I drove past him at 40 kilometers an hour, close enough that I could see his eyes. They were the right color, the right shape, the right face. But the smile didn't change as I passed. It didn't follow me. His head turned to track my truck, smooth and continuous and perfectly even, and the smile stayed exactly the same width, at exactly the same angle, like something painted on. In my mirror, he stood beside his truck and watched me go. He didn't get in. He didn't move. He stood there until the distance and the dark swallowed him. I drove the remaining kilometers to Village 3 without stopping. I completed the run. I parked the truck at the depot. I filed my final manifest. The night before my flight, Kolya found me at the depot. He'd driven in from Village 1 to see me off 230 kilometers out of his way, which for Kolya was the equivalent of a sentimental speech. He brought a bottle of vodka. We sat in the depot kitchen and drank in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "You saw Marat?" I hadn't told anyone. "How do you know?" "Because he's between Village 4 and Village 3 now. Others have seen him, standing by his truck, waving drivers down." "What is he?" "He's what the road shows you." Kolya poured another glass. He stopped. Now he's part of what makes others stop. "Is he alive?" Kolya drank, set the glass down. "I don't think alive is the right question." We sat for a while longer. Then Kolya shook my hand, both hands, the way Russian men do when they mean it, and told me to drive safe in America. And I left. I've been back in the States for 14 months. I drive regional freight now, out of Des Moines, mostly daylight runs, short routes, populated corridors, nothing longer than 6 hours. I don't drive at night anymore. I told the company it was a medical restriction, sleep apnea, needed a CPAP, couldn't do overnight hauls. They didn't question it. Plenty of daytime work for an experienced driver. The truth is simpler. and harder. I don't stop between towns. Not in Iowa, not in Nebraska, not on any highway in any state. If I need fuel, I check the map and make sure the station is inside a town limit. If I need to rest, I find a town. If the engine makes a sound I don't like, I keep driving until I reach a place where people live and lights are on, and the distance between me and the nearest human being is measured in feet, not kilometers. I know it's not the same. I know the winter roads of Yakutia are not the county highways of Iowa. I know that whatever lives in the dark between those villages, whatever patient, attentive thing, makes itself look like fuel depots and villages and missing friends, is 9,000 kilometers away on a road that doesn't exist 8 months of the year. But I also know what Seryoja told me, that when he stopped, the thing didn't try to kill him. It kept him alive. It kept him warm. It held him in place for 4 hours in -48 and returned him without a scratch. It wasn't hunting, it was collecting. And I know what Kolya told me, that Marat is between villages now, standing by his truck, waving people down. That Marat stopped once and now he's part of the road, part of what the road shows you. I think about Marat's smile, the width of it, the way it didn't move, the way his head tracked my truck with smooth mechanical precision. I think about the voice on the radio that knew my first name. I think about the village that appeared and vanished and left no mark on my odometer. And I think about the fact that in 4 years, I never stopped. Not once. Not for the headlights, not for the radio, not for the depot, not for Marat. I followed the rule every single time, and I'm here, and I'm fine, and I'm home. At least that's what I told myself until 3 weeks ago. A package came from Yakutsk. The company digitizes its old paper records now, and they'd started mailing drivers copies of their final season logbooks, a courtesy, a keepsake. Mine came in a brown envelope with a custom sticker on it. I almost didn't open it. Most of it was exactly what I remembered. My runs, my times, my deliveries, all in my own handwriting. But there's one entry near the end I've read maybe 40 times now, and I still can't explain it. It's dated March 11th, my last run. There's a delivery logged at a stop between Village 3 and Village 4. There is no stop between Village 3 and Village 4. There never has been, just the crossed-out dot on a map nobody would talk about. The cargo is listed as received in full. It's signed in my handwriting, and on the line where the clerk records who took receipt of the goods, in letters I did not write, in ink a shade darker than mine, is a single name. Danilov. Some nights now, driving westbound on I-80, the long flat stretch between Des Moines and Omaha, I check my mirrors and see headlights half a mile back, matching my speed, holding distance. And I don't know if it followed me, or if I brought it back with me, or if it was always here, on every long road, in every gap between towns. And the only difference between Siberia and Iowa is that in Siberia they had the decency to warn you. I don't stop to find out. I keep driving,